So Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and that just helps us open our space. So the question today we began with was uh, people identifying with their mental health. Right? But before we go to that space, sorry, Ralph, got to open the other doors out as well. Before we go into the identity space, we have to first ask ourselves, what do we mean by mental health? What do we mean by that? And who's defining it? Like, for example, someone is, I don't know, defending themselves and they are angry. Are they mentally healthy or unhealthy? Where someone is angry but for no apparent reason, are they mentally healthy or unhealthy? We have to identify what do we mean by mental health. So, firstly, in order to identify what mental illness is, we have to look at the other side, and you notice how language is used. We don't call it mental illness, we call it mental health. Having anxiety is to do with mental health, right? And therefore, you have to reduce it in order to become healthy. That's the kind of worldview out there. But anxiety, stress, depression, these are states of mind that you will occupy at some stage of your life. It's just the nature of life. Can't avoid it. This is like avoiding death. Can't be done. This is like avoiding daylight. It can't be done. It's the other side of duality. You cannot have one without the other. Right? You cannot have one without the other. So you cannot have um, day without night. It is part of the system. It's built in the cake. So these moments of anxiety and non-anxiety, these moments of depression and non-depression, let's even break that down a bit. So what do we mean by depression? Who's identifying it as depression? Who called it depression? Well, let me give you some facts, shall I? 1957, I think it was. A bunch of people got together, psychologists in the USA. US Aid is now demonstrating to you what that was all about. And they decided amongst themselves to create a manual of mental disorders. It's called DSM-1, it was called. And this was basically a bunch of psychologists who got together. Then they had to identify how this process was to be measured. Who wrote those measures? Is the measure that's applicable for an American applicable for an Irish man living in a village? Forget about the Africans, forget about the Asians, forget about all of that, because it's Eurocentric. Do you understand? It's Eurocentric. This is the way normal is. You have to behave the way we tell you how to behave, because we make that your normality. The question, so we have to ask ourselves, is who's defining all this nonsense? Because if I can't fit in there, then I'm not normal. Therefore, something is abnormal with me. And hence, you know why the original people were called Aboriginals. Interesting question. Who will call them that? Were they born being labeled as Aboriginals? Or did someone decide, no, you ain't the real thing. You're the Aboriginal. See how language is being used to manipulate your mind. You don't know what's true anymore. Don't know what's true anymore. So within the whole context and paradigm, you then introduce this idea of mental health. So DSM started in 1950s. Bunch of people got together, decided this is mental health, this is mental disorder. I think it wasn't until 1997 homosexuality in that DSM was a mental disorder, right? And if you were to dig deep enough, you will find that most of this manipulation is being going on simply in order to create a situation and then to give you a prescription for it. That's how it works. We had to be educated first. I don't call it educated, I call it conditioned. You had to be conditioned first to recognize anxiety as a mental illness before you are given a medicine for it. You have to be convinced first that you're mentally unwell. And whatever you believe, you become the nature of the mind. Whatever you believe, you become. So if you believe I am ill, then you're ill. Now we have many people that we work with theoretical, or should I say, objective measured analysis that demonstrate they may have cancer, they may have CVD, they may have this, that, and the other. But you ask them, how are you feeling? And they'll say, I've never felt better before. Never felt better. So who's measuring health? Is it the doctor that tells you, oh, by the way, because this little label tells me that your cholesterol ought to be 190, that you're ill? But 10 years ago, having cholesterol of 300 was all right. So you realize that the whole system is rigged. It's rigged. There is no understanding of the nature of the mind. And because there is this ignorance, you can define anything with anything. So what's the latest one? Back in the day, it used to be called the monkey mind. The mind never sits. So let's label it ADHD. What's the difference? You tell me. What's the difference between ADHD and the monkey mind? The nature of the mind is not to still, be still. That's the nature of it. Hence called the monkey mind. Can't seem to sit still. Has to be trained to sit still. Has to be disciplined to sit still. So Guru Nanak presents us with a very clear definition of what mental health is. Mental health is contentment. And contentment ain't peace. Contentment isn't not suffering. Contentment is recognizing duality for what it is. Out of your suffering will arise your pleasure. And out of your pleasure will arise your suffering. The whole thing is a system. It works by itself. Contentment is ensuring that when you are overwhelmed by one, you don't become consumed by it. You don't become it. Because once you become it, then it's very difficult to break you out. It's like a politician. Once you start supporting a party, very difficult to get them out. The same thing is with your mental nonsense. Same thing is here. And because there's no discipline, who disciplines the mind? Show me one historical individual that you can point to and say, oh yeah, you know what? We were taught how to discipline the mind by so-and-so. No. Even the fathers of psychology, be it Freud, be it Jung, be it Adler, be it Skinner, it's all about behavior. It's all about working with the ego. So Guru Nanak gives you two definitions. Definition one, what is the definition of mental health? It is contentment. What is the definition of mental illness? It's the ego. That's it. There isn't a good ego, there isn't a bad ego. All that you see around you today, all the destruction you see out there, all the callousness, the cruelty, the backstabbing, those dressed in religions betraying their flocks, the politicians being betraying their populations, the medics betraying their patients. The whole system is based on a reality that is so off the mark, so off the mark. And what is it? I ain't telling you to believe this or believe that. Because if you go to the belief system, theoretical system, knowledge system, it isn't your reality. It's someone else's. It's the poor man's way of living a life, where you take other people's knowledge and you are blindfold yourself, and you think you're holding a candle that's lit, someone else's knowledge. Without your own experience, there's nothing there. So, if you look back, you will find in history there are certain names that kind of seem to be immortal. 10,000 years, 5,000 years, 2,000 years. And some of these names you think, well, interesting, they must have something, because we can't remember who was living 200 years ago. How can we remember those who were living 500 years ago or 1,000? The reason is because they spoke about a reality. And that reality is called truth. And what does truth mean? That which does not change. Definition of truth: that which does not change. Everything else is an untruth. Relationships, friends, life, all of that stuff, irrespective, untruth. The only thing that will not change is this moment. You were born now, you are here now, and you will die now, and you will be reborn now. There is no other time. It is always now. You, me, everyone is stuck here. When Neil Armstrong, if he got to the moon, let's just assume he did, what do you think he was thinking when he got there? Oh, I wonder what my wife's doing. I can't wait to get home. I wonder what my kids are doing. I wonder what's on the TV. Oh, just another couple of days, I'll be down there. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter where you are. The mind always likes to play. Always. That's the nature of the mind. So, it's easy now to look at human emotion, nature of the mind, categorize it as something, educate you, condition you, but this is a condition you have now, so you need this new drug. Who profits out of this? Who profits? So when we begin to realize that actually maybe all of this can be resolved quite simply by looking at what is the nature of reality. So the whole premise is based on, so there are two realities, I've spoken about this before. The reality that we used to live in is now falling apart. That's the illusion. What does that mean? Things that we thought were our truth. Friends, relationships, finance, governments. We're the only people on the universe. We're the only selected life. And my religion is the only one, or my politician. All of that is now falling apart in front of you. And this is just a start. 2025 is going to shake the whole foundation of humanity. Forget about humanity, watch what happens to the religions. Because the house of cards is falling. And why is it falling? Not because something is good or bad or any of that stuff. Duality always goes. The pendulum always swings. So it's going from a reductionist worldview, a worldview where everyone is separate. You and me are a little accident. The universe just happens to be. No one created nothing. There is no intelligence behind it. It's all an accident. You're a machine. I'm a machine. You break down. We fix you. That was the reality. The merging reality now